This is Sky News with Jeremy Thompson.
Very good evening. The Deputy Prime Minister has visited the scene of the riots in Tottenham, promising that the government would work to repair the scars left within the community. Nick Clegg met police councillors and local business owners after earlier condemning the violence in the capital as completely unacceptable. Home Secretary has now come back to London after ending her holiday early in response to the unrest, and we're expecting a statement from her in the next few minutes. First, though, our main report from Sky's Ian Woods in Tottenham.
Nick Clegg came to see the destruction and get a taste of the anger which preceded the riot and the frustrations which continue to simmer. Those who caused the damage may be the main culprits, but the police and politicians are those fielding awkward questions.
It should have been contained, it should have been sorted out.
We've just been talking about it. I mean, the police will do their review of what actually happened, literally just right here on the high street.
This building contained 24 privately owned apartments. Naturally, the people who lost their homes and all their possessions are furious at those who started the fire, but they're also angry at the police for failing to protect them.
Our flats are it's just a shell now.
What have you lost, Pat?
Everything. In the clothes. The clothes that I'm in, that's all I've got. And that's all that we all have got. Just the clothes that we've got nothing. We've got absolutely nothing. And we were left to die, basically. We were left to die. It's like we were under siege. We didn't have anybody helping us, nobody at all. There were no police there. When we went outside, there were no police there. There was no ambulance. There was absolutely nothing.
If all this was apparently triggered by the shooting of Mark Duggan on Thursday evening, it's perhaps surprising that only 3 people have left flowers at the place where he died. IPCC investigators arrived on the scene at 9 p.m, almost 3 hours after the shooting. But 5 days into their inquiry, the information vacuum means that conspiracy theories are growing about how Mark Duggan died. The IPCC are appealing for witnesses, but suggestions that a bullet which was lodged in a police radio was one of their own and had not been fired from another weapon has raised more awkward questions. But people who live nearby told me that a police surveillance vehicle had been filming the road for several days before the shooting. They claim to have seen armed plainclothes police hiding in bushes nearby, and say the taxi in which Mark Duggan was a passenger was taken away from the scene before being brought back later for more tests. And while the rumour mill continues to churn out theories, the local MP wants the facts.
Clearly, when a man dies in that manner on a London street, there are big questions, and we see speculation in the media today. I know no more, but there are some serious answers about what the nature of the operation was in Tottenham, because it was not an operation led by Tottenham police, it was led by Operation Trident centrally.
It may be the middle of the week before the centre of Tottenham is reopened to the public. Community leaders here think it's important that the Metropolitan Police, or the IPCC, open up by then too.
As you can see from the pictures on the Sky Copter right now, we are live over the heart of Hackney. This is around Mayor Street, very much the focal point of Hackney, that North London borough, not far from the town hall here in the Hackney Empire, and there have been quite a number of people on the streets there. Their objectives uncertain at the moment, but certainly there have been a few scuffles with police. Police are now there in reasonably sizable numbers, and we've heard that 1 or 2 things. We saw a police car being attacked a bit earlier. They smashed up a police car. There are reports that bins at the side of the road have been set alight. At the moment, it's relatively low-key, but there is clearly tension in the air there in another North London suburb. Let's bring in our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt, who's in Scotland Yard. Martin, it certainly seems that the problems around some London boroughs, inner-city boroughs and mid-city boroughs are spreading like some sort of curious contagion at the moment.
Yes, I suppose it's very difficult to put your finger on exactly why it's happening, unless it is purely a copycat reaction. It appears, I think, at the moment, Jeremy, that whatever was going on in Hackney has certainly died down. Whether it's about to flare up again, it's very difficult to tell. I mean, witnesses talked about lots of chairs being thrown, but certainly some direct clashes with the police officers who went into that area. I suppose what's unusual, and it's quite early in the day for such a thing to begin. I mean, the last 2 nights we've seen those kind of activities being carried out largely under cover of darkness. You know, if we're going to see outbreaks of such violence in broad daylight, then I think senior officers here who've been meeting this afternoon planning for the possibility of such activity tonight will be rather alarmed. And as we've seen again, this is a borough that has been unvisited by this. I mean, quite close to the Tottenham area. But last night, you know, the disturbances were a long way, or some of them were a long way from Tottenham. I know the neighbouring borough, Enfield, had problems of its own, similar scenes to activity elsewhere. But, you know, Hackney for the first time perhaps, and in broad daylight, I think that is of some concern. And one other thing I picked up this afternoon, Jeremy, and this is going to be a continuing issue, I think, the suspension of riot cop training, public order training for some officers has had to be suspended. This is one of the consequences of the Met's force being stretched so much over the past 48 hours and the anticipation that they will have to cope with more of this. There are 2 levels of public order cops. There's the full-time squad, the riot squad if you like, the TSG, which is trained, fully trained, but you have a second level, Jeremy, of almost part-time riot cops. They do other duties. They're full-time officers. They do other duties. They drive patrol cars and so forth. But every year they undergo a 2-day retraining course. Where people will see the pictures where they're put in a riot scenario, bottles are thrown at them, bricks, Molotov cocktails, that kind of thing. And of course they're brought up to date with current thinking, new thinking, perhaps in tactics and training and techniques. All of that has had to be suspended, and the implication is, Jeremy, that there will be some officers going out tonight expected to take part in policing those events who will not have had that refresher course for the past year or so, and I think that is causing some concern.
Just looking at these pictures, there's a bit of a rush of people on the streets of central Hackney. Not sure whether the police have pushed in there, but certainly 2 sets of people on the streets heading off down C streets, off side streets, just off Mayor Street in the heart of town. See a lot of wood on the road there. It's noticeable whilst Martin was talking that a white articulated lorry turned up and was just waiting at the junction there when looters quite literally broke into the back and pulled out metal planks and things that were being carried in the lorry and just strewed them over the road. Some people made off with some of the bits of wood there. And it appears, Martin Brunt, as we watch these scenes with our viewers, that it is quite simply criminality, just overt criminality at the moment, opportunism, looting and criminality. There doesn't appear to be any greater or higher objective in mind for these younger people who are out on the streets at the moment.
Yes, we spoke to the Acting Commissioner Tim Godwin a couple of hours ago, and he said that people really do need to distinguish between genuine grievance over the shooting of Mark Duggan by police and criminality, and it's the phrase sheer criminality that police chiefs today have been using for many hours, and they were using that phrase on Saturday night to describe a lot of what was going on in Tottenham, saying that people had really just used the excuse and the anger and resentment within the Tottenham community over Mark Duggan's shooting to go on that trail of violence and damage. And I think they were saying that on Saturday night. I think that their words have been borne out and supported really by the events of last night, where it spread outside of Tottenham and in some cases as far south as Brixton. And again, as you say, perhaps this is another example of it happening today in Hackney, again in broad daylight, which is a new departure, but something that will cause great concern here.
Martin, for the moment, thanks. We'll keep watching these pictures from our Sky Copter and take you verbally at least 5 miles north to Tottenham, further north on an outer North London borough where the troubles first emerged earlier in the weekend. Ian Woods, whose report you heard earlier, is there for us live as we watch these disturbing scenes in Hackney in broad daylight today. Tell us a bit more about the feel of what the last 48 hours have brought to Tottenham, Ian, and what the reaction has been.
Not a terribly well-off area.
Well, I think, Jeremy, there's a great deal of frustration here that several issues are all coming to the fore now. For example, thousands of people are angry and irritated that the centre of Tottenham is still sort of sealed off 2 days after the riot because it creates a lot of inconvenience. But other people have got really serious concerns because they've lost their homes. We heard from one resident a short time ago who's lost everything she owns because she had an apartment in the building behind me. And there's great anger directed at the people who started that fire, of course. But there's also a great deal of anger at what they see as the lack of protection from the authorities on the night. They said that they could see police vehicles going up and down the road, but when it came to the point where the fire was being started, the police were nowhere in sight. So they've got real concerns about that. Lastly, I think there's a lot of concern from people that what they feel are justifiable questions which they are asking and wanting answers to as regarding the shooting of Mark Duggan are rather being overwhelmed by the rioting and the fact that people are taking to the streets in a criminal form, as we're seeing now in Hackney and as was seen in other London boroughs overnight, that somehow that is taking away from the original concern of theirs, which was the killing of Mark Duggan. And when I went back to the scene of the shooting on Thursday night, when I back there earlier today, there was almost a welcoming from a lot of people who, even though they didn't want to go on camera and talk about it, they were welcoming the fact that we were getting back to what they saw as the main issue, which was the shooting in this incident of Mark Duggan and how that happened. There is, of course, a lot of talk about whether or not he may have been armed, but also concern that shots may have been fired just from the police and not from any other weapon. And until the ballistics results, which are being looked at by the Forensic Science Service at the moment, are released, and we're hoping that's going to happen according to the IPCC within the next 24 hours, it does allow conspiracy theories to build. And even though I've talked to people who are very dismissive of execution-style tactics, they are still concerned until they find out exactly what happened and whether or not there was an attempt by Mark Duggan, if he did have a weapon, to fire it, or whether it was simply the police firing. That's the sort of information that they want to try to get to the bottom of.
Thanks very much, Ian, for the moment. So a very febrile, feverish atmosphere across parts of London at the moment over the weekend and continuing this Monday evening. Those pictures from Hackney, more evidence that the start of this unrest in Tottenham seems to have turned into some sort of contagion, some sort of copycat criminality in several areas of the capital. Sky's senior correspondent David Bowden has been to Brixton in South London to talk to those affected by last night's looting. And this is his report.
While the rioting and vandalism grabbed the headlines and the attention of the police, there was criminality taking place in London's hotspots that seems to have gone unchallenged thus far. Apparently without fear of being disturbed, let alone caught, looters helped themselves to everything from high-end electrical appliances to cigarettes, alcohol and cash. Azza Khan was one of many victims when both of his off-licences were hit by a gang of knife-wielding masked youths. This is the CCTV of the robbery taking place, and this is what else was happening.
Just got raided, 12 o'clock at night, good 30 of them. Just walked straight in, shutters were down, they just walked straight in.
And did what?
They had big knives in their hands, so can't really do nothing.
Were you here?
No, I had a couple of mates here. One of the staff, two of my mates. They had big knives, told them to go lock themselves in the bathroom before they get stabbed.
Other pictures from outside Mr. Khan's shop show the thieves carrying off their haul before moving on to their next target. Azza Khan doesn't believe the criminals were motivated by anything other than greed.
I think just an excuse for them to get out, get things out people's shops or whatever. Just an excuse.
Police have been criticised for effectively turning a blind eye to the mass looting. But one former officer says there's little they can do in such circumstances.
Once you've got a number of youths that are intent on that, the police have got little they can do to actually resolve the situation there and then. They can move people away, they can disperse crowds, but if those crowds are then intent on going somewhere else and starting again or reforming somewhere else, then you get this situation where basically the police and they are sort of playing cat and mouse around different areas of London.
At Brixton's famous market, stallholders and shoppers alike were mulling over the night's events, but were split about what caused this area to erupt into lawlessness.
They've taken the opportunity to just kind of use it to their advantages, most of the criminals, so it's just bad, it's just really bad.
What happened on Friday with the shooting of the boy up in Norwood?
You think there's a link?
Yeah, without a doubt.
When the pressure comes down, the poor get into their mind and they get going with their ego or whatever. But there was really no need for it.
Pinning it all down to barefaced criminality, I think that's a bit sort of naive. There may be some other issues as well which we need to look at and assess thoroughly.
Police forensic teams have been busy for many hours trying to catch the culprits, but it's not easy. Some people clearly believe that there is a link between the shooting dead by police in Tottenham of Mark Duggan and the unrest in other areas of London over the past few days. But all the evidence, certainly here in Brixton, points to a far simpler reason for the lawlessness. Looting and theft, basic criminality, and little or nothing to do with social justice. CCTV images from Azhar Khan's shop and dozens more will be checked and double-checked for clues. But how many of the looters ever see the inside of a courtroom is open to question. David Bowden, Sky News in Brixton.
Let's just remind you of the latest pictures from the Skycopter hovering over